Hello everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Sofreed. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about the books that I've read in the last few weeks. I'm going to be soft influencing you to read the books if you're interested. They're from all different genres, and then I'll be giving you a little bit of a review and my thoughts as I read these books, how I feel post reading them, and why I think you should read them. Also, Summerween and fall is a state of mind that I clearly will never leave, hence my background and my candle. So, welcome to the vibes of fall. So, the first book that I'm going to be talking to you guys about today is the most recent book that I finished. I actually finished it last night, so this review is very fresh. It is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This is my first Ali Hazelwood book that I've ever read. I just read it on my Kindle, so I don't have the physical book. Some of the books in this video will be pictures that I'll put up just because I either borrowed them or read them on my Kindle, and hence I don't own the physical copy. Nonetheless, I gave Bride 4 to 4.5 stars. I can't quite figure out if it's like a 4.3 or exactly a 4.5, but just so that way we're not dealing with semantics, I'm going to say 4.5 stars. For spice, I gave Bride 4 out of 5 stars. This was a fairly spicy book. It's not the spiciest book I've ever read, but it's also definitely a big part of it. I did like the level of spice in this book. However, I don't really want to get into the details of it. I feel like you need to just read it because there are some interesting elements to this book. I also gave the plot of this book a 4 out of 5 stars. But to start, the plot of this book is about a young vampire woman named Misery and a young werewolf alpha named Lo, and they agree to an arranged marriage to create peace between their species. The vampires and the werewolves in this series, just like a lot of other series, have been in battle for hundreds of years, and they tend to have interspecies marriages to create peace, and something also known as the collateral. And basically, a werewolf goes and lives with the vampires, or a vampire goes and lives with the werewolves, and they're kind of under the understanding that if something happens to either of their people on these enemy grounds, that the opposing party will be hurt. So both sides sort of agree to protect the species that they are playing host to so that their counterpart stays safe on the other enemy's lands. Misery is no stranger to being the collateral for the vampires, and she sort of has a strained relationship with her family due to this long history of her being used in their war games. While in enemy lands, she is trying to figure out a mystery from her personal life, but she also is trying to be a wife to her new werewolf husband. She is also not a stranger to being the only vampire in the places that she's living. She grew up with the humans, so the humans are another faction in this book that play into the interspecies wars between the werewolves, the vampires, and then we have the humans. But Misery quickly finds that she is in not the worst company, and we sort of see an enemies to lovers relationship between her and her werewolf husband. In theory, this book sounds silly, but I actually really liked the species dynamics, and I actually really loved their romance. They had a fantastic build-up to first an alliance and then a friendship and then a romance. There also are a lot of aspects of found family in this book, which was really heartwarming for a lot of different reasons. But my favorite thing about the book was Misery herself. She's definitely one of my new favorite female main characters. She is so funny. I have a couple quotes from the book highlighted on my Goodreads that I didn't highlight because they're super beautiful or super intelligent, but purely because she's so funny. And I'm gonna miss her. I wish Ali would write more from the perspective of Lo and Misery. I think we're getting a second book from another character's perspective soon, which I am interested in reading, but I'm gonna miss Misery moving forward. Like I was saying with the spice, it was kind of one of my cons about the book because they are an interspecies romance, so there is an interesting aspect that Ali Hazelwood chose to include in their relationship, and it really is just something that you need to decipher for yourself and see how you feel about it. But it was odd, but like, go off, I guess, if you're into that. I also felt like the plot was really good, and there was a huge buildup to the main antagonist's plan, And I sort of figured it out along the way, but there was a lot that I was surprised about. So for the twist factor, I would incorporate that and why I gave it a high rating. However, I did feel like the conflict was resolved very quickly and almost a little too easily. The main buildup of conflict is sort of a cut to scene. Like we get there and we know a bunch of stuff is about to go down, and then all of a sudden it just cuts to the aftermath. And I was like, what? So that kind of let me down, and that is a reason why it didn't get a 5 star from me. However, I really loved it. I would reread this book and I would recommend it for anybody that loves romance, that loves romantic fantasy, and that loves a strong but very funny female main character. The next book that I'm going to talk about is also one of my 4 star ratings. This one I kind of teetered between a 4 and a 4.5 as well, but when I think back on it, I believe it's definitely a 4. This is going to be Eat the Ones You Love by Sarah Maria Griffin. I borrowed this book from the library, and it's definitely a book that I will think about for years to come. I gave the plot a 3 out of 5. I gave the spice a 2 out of 5 because it's really not a spicy book, even though there is some romance. If you're a fan of Little Shop of Horrors, I think this is the book for you. The plot follows a young woman named Shell, and she is reeling from a breakup. In her grief, she stumbles along a flower shop in her local mall that is hiring, and she decides to apply for the job. The mall in the story is very crucial to the story itself. It has a lot of metaphors to the main characters and the actual plot, but basically this mall is decaying and sort of going to be closed down soon, but it's a big social aspect of all the characters' lives. So when Shell sees that the flower shop is hiring, she's kind of put off because she's like, wait, I thought the mall was closing down. But she decides that with everything else sort of falling apart in her life, it wouldn't be that off-putting to apply to a job in a mall that is also falling apart. When she goes in to see if she can get the job, she ends up getting hired like on the spot. And she also ends up feeling very attracted and in tune with the main florist. The main florist's name is Nev, and the book is sort of from her perspective, from Shell's perspective, from another character's perspective. But really, once you're reading it, you figure out that the book is not truly from any of their perspectives. And what I mean by that is the book is from the true third person omniscient. I think that's the right tense. It's from the perspective of a sentient plant, okay? In Nev's flower shop, she grows lots of different species of plants. However, in the greenhouse in the mall, she has cultivated a very special type of plant species. And this plant is sentient and it is also evil. I didn't even realize that the point of view was the plant until many chapters into the book. And I was like, oh. So while we have sort of a budding romance building, we have a woman reeling from grief in her life and trying to put her life back together by finding out what she's interested in and what she wants to do outside of her relationship ending. It's also about a plant that basically wants to take over the world. It's creepy. I would recommend it for fans of horror, for fans of fantasy, for fans of horror and fantasy together. And one of my favorite aspects of the book is it had the most beautiful quotes on grief and love and life lessons. And I really think Sarah Maria Griffin is truly a beautiful writer. And I look forward to reading her other works and experiencing her knowledge and wisdom in different stories as well. One of my only cons with the book is I feel like the plant as the antagonist wasn't really thoroughly explained enough for my liking. I'm just more of the type of reader, and even when I watch like movies or shows, I like my endings to be tied with a neat little bow. So I'm not always into it being left open for interpretation, but there aren't a lot of explanations to his powers and like what he wants. He's kind of just always hungry and always wanting to feed and always wanting to do evil things, which I guess that's okay if you're okay with that. I just was like, give me more. The next book I'm going to talk about is also a 4-star rating for me. I actually have this one. It's Passion Project by London Sperry. I saw this on Goodreads as a recommendation. I'm not the biggest romance reader, but the plot did sound interesting to me, and so I picked it up at Barnes & Noble one day, and I'm glad that I did. This book follows a young woman in New York City named Bennett, and she is reeling from the loss of her boyfriend who died tragically a few years prior. She's lost. She doesn't understand what she's doing with her life. She's trying to grieve him, but she's also trying to figure out what she wants to do for work eventually, if she wants to go back to school, how she's going to rebuild the friendships that she's lost while she's been dealing with the grief. And then she ends up meeting a man named Henry who decides to take her on a passion project adventure around the city where they basically engage in different types of hobbies and careers and special interests to reignite her passion in basically anything since she doesn't have one yet. Obviously, this is a friends to lovers dynamic. It's really sweet. There's a lot of heavy topics of grief in it, so I would give a slight trigger warning, but I feel like the author handled it really beautifully without it being too intense. I would give it a spice level 3. There definitely is some spice in it, but it wasn't too much. And I feel like the characters were so sweet that it almost didn't feel like too spicy. I gave the plot a 4 out of 5. That's kind of what took my rating down a bit. But mainly my only con with it was just that I have a harder time reading romance books that are strictly romance. So it took me a bit longer to read this book. And I felt like I was kind of losing interest in it at certain points, but then I would come back to it and I was glad that I ended up finishing it because the ending was my favorite part. But there wasn't a lot of conflict in their romance other than just what the main character is dealing with healing within herself. I feel like they resolved everything on a fairly good note, but I do feel like they kept having a lot of misunderstandings that were honestly annoying me because I was like, if you guys just practiced communication, this would be resolved in like 10 seconds. However, it has a beautiful ending. I loved the way the main character ended up actually confronting her grief. And then I loved the way that she was able to find her way back to her friends and her family and her passions, but also to herself. Next, I want to move on to my 5-star reads, and that's going to start with Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This year, I decided to reread all of the Hunger Games, starting with the first 3 in the trilogy, so that when this came out, I would be more prepared. And I loved this book so much. It's definitely one of my favorite books I've ever read. It's a 5-star overall for me. I would give the plot 5 stars or more, honestly. I just am always amazed how she continues on with such a fantastic series and world, but it never feels like a cash grab for me. Like she really does build onto these characters so beautifully and in ways that make so much more sense when you go back and read the original 3. This is not a spicy book, so I'm not even giving it a rating for that. And we don't always need to have spice for a book to get a 5-star when it comes to my opinion. So I was very much okay with that. This book is about Haymitch from the original trilogy and his games and basically what went down behind the scenes. So, as we know from the original Hunger Games books, there's a lot more than meets the eye when it comes to the Capitol and the propaganda that go into all of the Hunger Games. And Haymitch's games are definitely the prime example of what goes on behind the scenes that the audience does not see and that the people of the future will never know. This is such a beautiful addition to the original series. It made me love Haymitch more than I already did because I feel like I really understand him now and I understand the grief and the trauma that drove him to be the type of person that he becomes. Haymitch really is the spark to Katniss's revolution in the future of the Hunger Games, and he never gets enough credit for that. And I just feel like all people who read this feel that way. My only con with this book is that it is so freaking sad. And it was definitely disturbing in some areas, but if you're a Hunger Games fan, you already know that going into these books. And I am so excited to see this movie. I plan on going in my full pajamas in Woody Harrelson style. Next is another 5-star read. This is going to be the reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. I love Holly Jackson. I'm a big Good Girls Guide to Murder fan. And when I saw that this was available on Libby, I immediately got it on my Kindle and I read it in like 3 days. It's a fairly long book, but I do feel like it's a page turner and I could not put it down until I solved the mystery. I'm giving the plot a 5 and it is not a spicy book. There is a slight little innocent romance in it, but there is no spice. This book follows a teenager named Belle. She is quite the talk of the town because her mother disappeared when she was 2 years old and her disappearance was never solved. Everybody assumes that she was murdered, but one day she comes back home. Belle is obviously disturbed. This is basically a stranger. She's never known her. And her dad is really disturbed. Some people in the town and some people even in their family thought that Belle's dad could have killed Rachel, Belle's mom, but now Rachel's here. Obviously, nobody killed her. Rachel sort of wants to slide back into Belle and her husband's life and act like nothing happened. But Belle is very creeped out, and she's also very determined to figure out if Rachel's story about her disappearance is true. And when she starts to figure out that Rachel is lying, she becomes hell-bent on figuring out the truth and pinning it on her mom. This is definitely a very gripping story about family dynamics, and one of my favorite parts of it was how traumatizing family dynamics affect people differently. There's talks of kleptomania, there's talks of eating disorders, and just the overall dread that a person basically coming back from the dead can do to everyone, even extended family members. The best part of the story is that there is a documentary team that wants to make a documentary based off of Rachel Price's disappearance, and they're basically interviewing the family when she returns home. So now it starts to become the reappearance of Rachel Price, hence the title, and the documentary team is very much a part of encouraging Rachel's story for when she comes back, but also we have somebody special on the team that starts to help Belle unravel the mystery, and that's where we get our little cute romance. My only con with this book is it was fairly long. I do feel like some of it could have been summarized a little bit shorter and a little bit faster, but I loved it. I would reread it, and I definitely recommend it to anybody that liked Good Girls Guide to Murder, to anybody that likes mysteries and thrillers, and to anybody that likes true crime, because there's definitely a true crime element to it. And last but not least, I'm saving my favorite for the end. It is going to be Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. This book was recommended to me for a while through my Goodreads algorithm, through TikTok, through other book readers in the community, and for some reason I just never really got around to it until a couple of weeks ago, and it was delicious and disgusting, but absolutely perfect. I don't want to get too much into the plot because I feel like I can't really explain it without giving things away, but it's basically about serial killers that kill serial killers. So if you're a fan of Dexter, you will love this book, but it's highly romantic and highly spicy. So even if you're not a Dexter fan, I think you will like it. I gave this a 5 out of 5 rating. I gave the plot a 5 out of 5 rating, and the spice, I don't think I can rate it because it's definitely the spiciest book I've ever read. That would be my one main con with it. And there are quite a few trigger warnings involving the spice, but also trigger warnings involving the gore and the horror that ensues in this book. So basically, we're following Butcher and Blackbird. Those are the aliases of two prolific serial killers who kill other serial killers. And it's kind of a cat and mouse game where they keep running into each other and stepping on each other's toes. And then they realize they should make a little game out of it and continue to compete to see who can get to their target quicker. Obviously, they start to form a romantic attachment to one another, which seems odd if they're both serial killers. However, they're not sociopaths. They both have some type of trauma that they experienced in their childhood or in their teenage years, and that sort of changed their psyche and made them want to take monsters out of the world since they have their own experience with demons. It's very high stakes. It's very gory. It's definitely got a fun horror element to it where if you wanted to read it in the fall time around Halloween, it would be a good idea. I read it in the summer and I thought it was so good, but I'm also an out of season theme reader, so I would read this at any point in the year. But I will say it's gross, it's weird, there are disturbing elements. It wasn't too disturbing for me, but I would say read the trigger warnings. There's a whole page when you first open it that Brynne Weaver included, which I think is really awesome of her, just in case anything would make your stomach a little queasy. But I loved it. Butcher and Blackbird will go in my top favorite romances of all time and also my top horror or thrillers of all time. But thank you so much for watching. I hope I influenced you to read at least one of these books. If you have already read all of them or any of them, let me know what you rated them down below, or you can friend me on Goodreads and I can see your ratings in real time. My next reading video will be a reading vlog where I'm reading Bride by Ali Hazelwood and also The Conditions of Will by Jessa Hastings. So I'm looking forward to posting that and letting you guys see what a day in my reading life sort of looks like behind the scenes. Please subscribe subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you'd like to get notifications when I post. But you can also follow me on Instagram and TikTok or Goodreads as well. And I post more bookworm content on those apps. So thank you so much once again, and I'll see you next time. Bye.